Hi, it's Hayden here, and you're very welcome along to Man in the Mirror. Now, Man in the Mirror is a podcast where each week I talk to a male guest about their work, their life, what they think about the man that looks back at them in the mirror. We discuss skincare, grooming, their morning and evening routines, and they offer some advice on products that work well for them. Now, this week, my guest is Austin Mutti-Mewse, who is the brand manager at gentlemen's grooming brand Truefitt Hill. Now, if you're not familiar with Truefitt Hill, they were founded in 1805, which makes them officially the oldest barbershop brand in the world, according to the Guinness Book of Records. Truefitt Hill, we haven't really covered this on the podcast before, but Truefitt Hill are one of those classic barbershop brands, say the original, you could argue, part of London society for nearly 220 years. They have served kings, prime ministers, discerning clientele, shall we say, military leaders, and now they're based in the beautiful environment of St. James in London. Really interesting to talk to Austin. You know, there's that challenge, I suppose, with those kind of brands. They have discerning customers, as we said, politicians and high society, but also how do they stay relevant to today and today's customer? So we talk about that during the podcast. Austin is a fascinating guy. I met him actually a few months ago and have been trying to work out a time to get him on the podcast because, as you'll hear in our chat, not only does he have this role of brand manager and almost, I suppose, brand guardian at Truefitt Hill, he really understands the history of brands, and he's been working in fashion retail and worked with some eminent brands and personalities beforehand. But he has this whole other side to his life, which I will let the conversation roll out in the podcast, but you won't want to miss it. He has some fascinating stories. So I won't say too much more, but you're going to really enjoy this conversation with Austin. The only other thing to say is, as always, if you are kind enough to want to tip and to offer a donation to the podcast, it'd be hugely appreciated. I have an account over at ko-fi.com, which is ko-fi.com/man in the mirror. And as always, to be transparent, there's no advertising on the podcast. You just hear the conversation as it happens without too much interruption. But any donation would go towards the running costs of uploading to the streaming sites and the service that I use to record the actual podcast. So it would be hugely appreciated. So it's ko-fi.com/man in the mirror. So housekeeping out the way, let's get into it. This is Austin Mutti-Mewse, who is the brand manager at Truefitt Hill, talking to me, Hayden, on Man in the Mirror. Let's go. Welcome along to Man in the Mirror. I'm here at Truefitt Hill in Mayfair with Austin Mutti-Mewse. Thank you so much for doing this, Austin. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm very well. I'm excited to talk to you about all things mirror-like.
Oh, my goodness. Well, in talk about grooming and style, I just had a fantastic haircut from Aldo here at Truefitt Hill. And it is that sort of the extra detail and the extra level of service that you get at somewhere like Truefitt Hill. And when we finished, he kind of wiped my face with this West Indian limes and water mix, yes. And there was a scalp tonic, and all these kind of different treatments, and it really did kind of take it up a level. And he's managed to sharpen up my terrible haircut and make me look really smart. So it's fantastic to be here. And I suppose it'd be great to start if you could tell me a little bit about the history of this wonderful brand for people that aren't quite so aware of Truefitt Hill.
Well, Truefitt Hill is the world's oldest barber. So the world's oldest male grooming brand. We started in London as a court wig maker in 1805. And we've looked after 9 monarchs, including Queen Victoria. We covered her wig.
Really?
It's, following what you just said there, Hayden, about your experience with Aldo and sitting in that barber chair, we've all got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
As to the idea that you can come in with your dad or brother or the significant other man and sit in that chair and just switch off. There's no music, there's no access to your phone.
Yeah.
And you just kick back and you're in me time, 30 minutes. Each service lasts about 30 minutes, be it a haircut or the traditional hot towel wet shave. And the brand is opening up to a wider and wider audience. And I think it's because partly St. James is a new old territory that's being rediscovered.
You were saying, I mean, for people that don't know the area, there's Berry Brothers, the very famous wine merchant. There's St. James's Palace down the road. There's famous rifle stores, hat shops, all kinds of things. A lot of cigar stores
yes.
on this road. And I guess a lot of it's associated with the gentlemen's clubs of Mayfair and this area,
and Royal
Warrants and Court but there's history in every Basingstoke, really, isn't there? There's so much around here.
And the world turns and we turn with it, but at a slightly slower pace. And that's the beauty of this little enclave that is St. James. And as you say, there's stores and there's shops and there's stories and there's people. We're really privileged to have a really good core staff here. Wendy, our master barber, has been here 40 years. Tina the cleaner's been here longer.
Tina the cleaner.
Loyal staff that want to give a good service. Actually leave, the client leaves and the client's happy, but the barber's really happy.
Well, I had a wonderful experience. And I think, as you say, that self-care, that me time, I mean, let's not pretend somewhere like Truefitt Hill to have haircut is not going to be the cheapest place, but in terms of the amount of time that's spent and the quality of the haircut and the sort of the level of service, it doesn't seem ridiculous, does it? I think it's good value, and you can't really put a price on that kind of leaving. I feel really good now.
Well, there was when you were in that chair earlier, Hayden, there was a couple that came in from California with a daughter, and they've been in Paris yesterday, came here today to come to Truefitt Hill.
Today. Are they going back to buy products?
To buy products. Yeah. They're going back to Paris tomorrow.
Yeah.
The gentleman had heard about the new Highgrove range in association, a collaboration with the King's Foundation and Highgrove Gardens, and he wants to buy it. And he wants to buy a slice of his, as he said, old England.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how one feels being in this space. Yeah.
So there was the perfect segue, really, because obviously we've touched upon the barbershop services, of which, you can all the usual things and more. But the Truefitt Hill brand, Austin, extends beyond that, doesn't it, into a range of products and grooming and colognes. And you mentioned Highgrove and the work you're doing with him.
And that's my role, Hayden. I've been here 5 years, and I come from a history of fashion and bespoke on Savile Row. And when one comes in here, there's 5 barbers at any given time, and they average probably 14 appointments each a day, and they're full.
Yeah.
So what's next? And what opens up the brand to the wider audience, particularly internationally and online, is product. And so 18 months ago, we launched a new fragrance called Mayfair. It's very citrusy. It's quite a soft citrus, actually. And it's become, Mayfair's named after the fact that we were in Mayfair in our very beginnings in 1805. Mayfair's the fragrance that men are buying, taking home their wives and girlfriends are wearing.
Yeah. I'm wearing it today, actually, and it's very easy to wear, very zesty, and there's a lightness, but it sticks around, I think.
And it does, yes. Yeah. It's to do with the oil alcohol content.
Right.
More alcohol, the fragrance doesn't last quite so long.
Right. No, it's very good. And then
Highgrove.
Highgrove. Yeah. So tell me a bit about Highgrove.
Highgrove has been bubbling around for a while and presenting His Majesty and the King's Foundation and Highgrove Gardens with different scents. And then His Majesty, who gets really involved in something if he's really excited about it, he selected the fragrance. The entire story I put forward is the fact that the note in there, the base note, is cedar. And His Majesty bought Highgrove in 1980 off the Macmillans for many, many reasons, but because he fell in love with a great cedar of Lebanon tree that stood in front of the house.
Right.
Diseased and felled in 2008, and so it's no longer there. But as soon as cedar was mentioned, that was his
eyes lit up.
His eyes lit up. So yes, it's a very cedary, lavender, lemon, cypress scent. And then, yes, as I say, he got very involved in it, and in the end allowed us to use one of his great watercolours as the basis of the packaging.
It's amazing. And there's a range of products, isn't there? There's soaps, splashes. Yeah, well, tell me a bit about what you can get in the range.
So when one talks about Truefitt Hill, one will ask, what is it? What is the staple wash bag items for a gent? And Highgrove has that collection. So we're looking at pre-shave oil, shaving cream or a hard soap. The hard soap's the one you use with your brush.
Yep.
the aftershave balm, which is a moisturizer, and then you finish it with the cologne. Your audience might think, oh my goodness, that's a whole process. But the more you do that and you use that regime every morning, the quicker and the shorter it becomes almost. And the pre-shave oil, be it the Highgrove or the traditional Truefitt Hill version of it, that's our golden ticket. The pre-shave oil is the number one element in the whole regime that really works, because
Just to make shaving easier, smoother.
So the process is you start with that hot towel, as hot as you can get it on your face, so it spikes the hairs on your face and they get styled on end. Then you add a few drops of the pre-shave oil on the face, and then you add the shaving cream. The pre-shave oil really adds the glide of the razor blade.
Yeah. So you've talked about some of the new collections for Truefitt Hill. What were the origins in terms of some of those original fragrances? What are the sort of classic ones that people might find in
West Indian limes.
Right.
West Indian limes.
I had.
West Indian lime says, I am on holiday.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful fragrance. The late Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, he wore it for 60 years. He actually wasn't the cologne, it was the aftershave balm. It was the moisturizer that he wore and loved. And some other members of the family like it too. There's a nostalgia to it. It just feels like you're stepping back in time. You're with an older relative, probably. Yeah, on a holiday, maybe, be it UK or abroad.
Yeah.
It's the fragrance that says, I've stepped out of my everyday and I'm doing something that's for me. So that's lovely. And another one that's got a great heritage to it is Clubman, that a million years ago was called Imperial Bouquet, and that was created for Queen Victoria.
Right.
In 1900 for her Diamond Jubilee.
Yeah. And then you worked more recently with Netflix's The Gentleman?
Yes.
Gentleman?
Gentleman, yes.
Gentleman.
With Guy Ritchie. The project was for brands, and there was Arsene Ettinger and Henry Poole on Savile Row, and a tea brand, Avantia Tea, to support with a campaign the Gentleman series. So where would the gentleman go for his shave? Where would he buy his leather goods? What would he wear? Where would he go for his suiting? And so we produced a great campaign with a great agency called Muto in Switzerland. And it's a lovely, lovely look at who the gentleman is.
And it's been a smash hit anyway, so I'm assuming the range is doing really well as well.
And for the gentleman, what we decided to do was take one of our existing fragrance line, Sandalwood, and just reimagine the packaging for the gentleman.
Yeah.
Sandalwood's a great fragrance for the winter.
Yes.
It really is.
Oh, that's great. Well, we've talked about some of the products in the Truefitt Hill range, but I'd love to know a bit about your morning and evening routine, Austin. I'm sure many of the products that you have at work feature, but what does your routine look like in the morning? Do you have a kind of tight edit of things that you do? You're a fellow beard wearer like myself. Yeah, tell me about your routine.
Trying to get my son out the bathroom.
We have teenagers of similar age.
Yeah, so he's constantly looking at his hair. And of course, he uses all the products.
Yeah. And all the hot water.
And all the hot water, yes. My, every morning I shave my neck, pre-shave oil.
Yep.
We're talking about seasons and sandalwood, but sandalwood is a favourite fragrance. And so I use the shaving cream for sandalwood. I don't do the hard soap with a brush. Just quickness, I use the cream, sandalwood or Mayfair. And so I shave my neck, but I do moisturise my beard every other day with the beard oil.
Right.
The beard oil, again, a few drops, really massage it into your beard. And
you go sandalwood?
Yeah. And it prevents that itchiness that one sometimes gets as a beard wearer.
Yes. Yeah, and get to that skin underneath.
Yes. And it's an oil, but it doesn't leave an oily finish.
Right.
So just don't use too much of it.
Yeah.
And then I use a aftershave balm as a moisturiser, and then a cologne. And I've fallen in love with Highgrove.
Yes.
That's my go-to at the moment.
Well, I guess you have a sort of special connection to it.
Yes.
And does your routine differ very much in the evening? Or do you do, what do you do before bed? Anything particularly?
I grab one of my wife's, a cleanser, and I do cleanse the skin.
Good.
I do that. Yeah. I just think you're wiping away the day, really.
Yeah.
Totally fresh.
Yes.
Day.
Yeah, you don't want to go to bed on the pillows feeling shiny and greasy, do you? Yeah. And do you think there's a typical Truefitt Hill customer, Austin?
I think I used to think there was, and it was an older gentleman, privileged background probably, coming in once a week for a shave, haircut, or some sort of form of service.
So some people come in weekly?
Some gents wouldn't dream of shaving at home.
Really?
They come here.
Must be nice.
It's very indulgent, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's lovely. But now I feel the Truefitt Hill gentleman is... We look after gentlemen from every walks of life. And that's the gentleman.
It certainly seemed, as I was sitting in the chair earlier, definitely a cross-section of ages and all sorts of people. It certainly didn't have a stuffy feel, even though the surroundings are beautiful, and you see the history, and there's gorgeous paintings and
paneling and
paneling and sort of military history everywhere. But somehow that felt quite inviting rather than intimidating.
It's funny that one never knows who's in the chair.
Well, I'm sure,
and sometimes there's a double take.
Yeah, because it's we're close to. Well, we're close to Parliament and we're close to high society. So I'm sure it's favoured by that kind of
it's fun
gent as well.
Yes, yeah. And I remember there was an American in quite a while ago now, and he was just talking about the royal family with no idea there was a member of the royal family next to him who was lifting his copy of The Country Life higher and higher, hoping not to be recognised.
I'm sure you're always the object of discretion, and one has to be quite sort of.
Yes.
Yeah.
The barber's led by the customer.
Right.
Some people don't want to talk. Yeah. Some other people do want to share. And I think wasn't there something about ladies talking to their hairdressers and sharing issues and going into health problems and mental health and everything and which way between. That's happened a little bit.
Barbers are starting to see. I'm not surprised at all. I've certainly spoken to other barbers and barber brands, and there's definitely that move to open those conversations in the chair, because I suppose it is a place of vulnerability, and you can feel maybe almost that sort of anonymity that you don't have to know the person so well is sometimes a good space. But also on the flip side, you have to be aware of, for the barber, it can be sometimes quite a sort of heavy burden to carry around. You don't want to be sort of giving them too much of that each day. But do you think younger customers are coming in? Is that changing sort of the profile of what you're offering at Truefitt Hill, or does it tend to be that people are buying into this classic service and the sort of quality? Is it changing? Are you seeing a different kind of customer coming in?
I use an example of my nephew. Never didn't know anything about Truefitt Hill. He was 18. His mum bought him entry level from Truefitt Hill, and now he buys the 1805 fragrance and the balm and that's his fragrance. And I think he really enjoys the fact that it's not a well-known fragrance.
Yes.
And people ask him, Ben, what are you wearing?
What is that?
He feels special.
Yeah.
And that's a whole part of the process here at Truefitt Hill. It's that feeling individual.
Yeah.
There's so many luxury brands. I wouldn't say we're a luxury brand. We're a traditional British heritage brand. And we take ownership of that. We love it.
Exactly. I think, you have to sort of lean into that. And I guess that's what customers want, isn't it? Whether they're young or old, we're coming here for the quality and the heritage and the history of the brand.
It's lovely to see grandfathers coming with sons and grandsons. It's lovely when you get a 3-generation mix.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lovely thing.
And we talk a bit about the brand, and I'd love to know a bit more about your sort of work history, Austin, because you mentioned earlier on about working on Savile Row and working in sort of tailoring and fashion. What were you up to before you were at Truefitt Hill?
David Beckham used to call me the history man. When he and I were at the brand called Kent & Cohen.
Yes.
He was very much involved in Kent & Cohen.
Yes.
The designer there was Daniel Pants.
Rugby shirts. And
Kent & Cohen was a sporting brand that started in the 1920s that was reimagined by David and Daniel Kearns. And I was the person who would look at the history of the brand and say to them both, look, this is what we were doing in 1930. Let's see how the past can influence the now, future. So we used to work on product design together. And then before that, I was at Hardy Amy's, and then dipped my toe in at Kilgore and Goose and Hawks a little bit.
Right.
And I was the history man. I love history, and I love storytelling, and I love collecting stories.
So I guess there's a thread with those brands. I say there is heritage, but a desire to make sure that those brands are relevant to the modern gent and the modern consumer, which is
Hardy Amies especially.
Yeah.
Hardy Amies, gosh, I mean, there was nothing between the man and the brand. The brand was the man and the man was the brand.
Yes.
He was extraordinary. I met him just twice. The first time I met him, he was in the summer, it was at a mutual friend's house, and he turned to me and said, "Gosh, you've got good legs."
nice. I'll take that
I could go on
compliment.
a catwalk. but Hardy Amies, he was the man that put menswear on the catwalk.
Yes.
At the Savoy in 1962, I think it was, or 63.
Was that the first?
Yes, that was the first menswear show.
catwalk?
Yeah.
Wow.
He worked with Hepworths, and he created the suit that men could pay a little bit off every week on their Hepworths card.
Innovator.
An innovator. He wanted the ordinary man to look good, and he did that. Terrible snob. Great witty sense of humour. If you were laughing with him, if that humour is pointed towards you, it could be quite cutting.
Yes.
Great mimic. He designed the costumes for 2001: A Space Odyssey, working with Freddie Fox, the milliner, on the hats of those space stewardesses, on those amazing costumes for Leonard Rossiter and other people in that film. He designed the interiors of the Jensen sports car. He was consultant on the England shirt in '66. Had to be red. We have to use red. The red has got to be in there because red is the most masculine of colours.
So you think of the lifting the trophy.
Bobby Moore,
That's the shirt, isn't it?
And he dressed Bobby Moore before and certainly afterwards, and the other chaps as well. So, and also he did a wonderful collaboration with Crown Paints for this great, and a wallpaper brand as well. Yeah, wallpaper brand, can't think of the name. Amazing interiors. So, and he was a spy during the Second World War, his parachuters into behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal. That man was absolutely phenomenal.
As you say, so such a rich history of stories to be able to tell, and that you could bring into the brand and showcase.
And Savile Row, people say now, gosh, it's changed. But Savile Row changed when Hardy arrived in 1945 because he opened a women's shop on a menswear street. And he did that through the financing of a lady called Virginia Sherrill, who had been married to Cary Grant and then became the Countess of Jersey. And it was the Count's money, actually, that enabled Hardy to move in. I don't think it was a mistake that he arrived on Savile Row because he always loved menswear, but initially started with women's wear. I think if it had been Cary's money, he'd have probably started with menswear from the get-go.
Right.
But because it was the Countess Jersey's money, Earl of Jersey's money, and Virginia wanted clothes.
Started with
Virginia, and then moved into Princess Elizabeth, and then, of course, he dressed the Queen for years.
Yes.
Alongside Hartnell.
Yeah. When we met a few months ago, Austin, we had a chat, and you were kind enough to share a bit more about your life, and as well as being a supremely dapper man, and on this fascinating CV of work in fashion, and now with these sort of heritage brands. You have an interesting, teenage years, early 20s. You have a twin brother.
I do, yes.
And this, I don't know how it came up. I imagine if you sat next to Austin at a dinner party, not only would he regale you stories of, the people he's worked with and these fabulous brands, but this story would emerge, which when he told me, it made my eyes bulge. It was just so brilliant, and it would be remiss of me to go through this podcast and not touch upon it. So if you could take me back and take the listeners back to what happened with you and your brother, and you started writing letters.
Yes. Someone said, define it. And I said, I am the man who's one handshake away from Charlie Chaplin and Rudolph Valentino and James Dean and Marlon Brando and Humphrey Bogart and the Kennedys. My twin brother and I, very different growing up. There was a point where we left one school going to the next. The history master decided to set all the boys a brief, and that brief was, to write to and get a response from a famous
Sounds like
person.
one of those sort of end of term things when they're struggling to think of what to do.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And so Howard and I had watched a movie called The Winds with Lillian Gish at our grandmother's house on a Saturday afternoon, the BBC Two movie matinee.
Yeah.
And Howard said, we should write to Lillian Gish. And I said, okay, but how do you do that? Well, we found her address in Who's of America in the local library in New Malden, where we grew up in Surrey. A letter was dispatched. 2 weeks later, a small card comes back from Lillian Gish. And it was always a standing joke in our family that one almost had to write one's thank you note for one's Christmas present before opening because Granny Violet was such a stickler on manners. So Violet said, "This is wonderful, Miss Gish." Wrote the thank you note. So Howard wrote a very formal letter on the back of the envelope.
So you're writing a thank you note for the
note. Yes. So. Yes. So on the back of that thank you note to Lillian Gish to say thank you for writing, I put on the back of their PS, we're 12. There's a girl I quite like on our street. I quite like athletics. And I got a pet rabbit called Thumper. Off it goes into the post.
This is all good information for Lillian.
Lillian wrote back again and said, "I can't believe you're 12. This is incredible. I'm lucky. I made a transition from silent film to sound. I'm still working." Lots of people didn't. So here are the addresses for Paula Negri and Vilma Banky and Fatty Arbuckle's wife, Addie McPhail, and Charlie Chaplin's wife, Lita Gray. And I'm sure they'd love to hear from English twins from Grey Surrey. And Hazen, that lone call was the floodgates open. Howard was writing 30 letters a week.
Was he?
Yeah, 30 letters a week. And then sending gifts. Fortnum Mason's biscuits went down really well.
I bet.
A box of shortbread from Fortnum's.
But it seems like such a glimpse into a past time, doesn't it now? With all this sort of quaintness of... I can't imagine our kids now handwriting a letter to anyone, but maybe your son does.
No. Well, he wants to thank you, though.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think if one wants to follow someone now, it would be Instagram.
Yeah. Or if you saw them, it'd be, can we get a selfie together?
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway.
So that was an extraordinary time writing these letters. Letters moved very quickly into phone calls.
Yeah.
I remember and it just fell into
through your teenage years, you were writing letters, making calls.
So at age 15, the phone calls start coming into the house. There we were with my mum and dad, my sister Rowena, and she was a bit jealous because nobody ever wrote to her. And my mum used to say, "But you don't write to anyone."
Waiting by the phone.
Yes. Oh. So, 15, middle of the night, the phone rings, and I think, gosh, someone's died. So, and I hear Mum on the landing, and she knocks on my bedroom door, and she said, "Austin, it's Marlene Dietrich on the phone for you."
No.
And I follow my mum along the landing in the bedroom because there was a phone in the hall and a phone in Mum and Dad's room, sitting on the bed. And Marlene had written to us. She'd rang us, Howard and I, to tell us off, because in that letter we'd said to Marlene Dietrich, "We've also heard from Betty Davis and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Jimmy Stewart and Lana Turner." And she said, "You've just lumped me in with a load of nobodies." and when I said to her, "Well, Miss Dietrich, everyone we've written to or spoken to, we've suggested to them, who else? Who would you nominate for us to write to?" "Nominate? There is no one else." The buck stops at me. It's Marlene Dietrich and there's nobody else.
It's like this sort of form of chain letter almost. So they're all suggesting other people you should contact.
And I'd had no idea the impact of the twins made until one old movie star had been in a function in Palm Springs, rang Howard and I and said, "I'd just been in this award ceremony and I was on a table with Howard Keel and Ruby Keeler, Zsa Gabor, Billy Dove, Ginger Rogers. And Ginger Rogers had mentioned, 'Oh, I've heard from the twins.' And Billy Dove said, 'Oh, I got a box of biscuits from the twins.'
I love those guys."
And Zsa Gabor said, "Who are these twins? and why are they writing to me?" So we did.
So they were feeling left out.
We're feeling left out. And then the letters phone calls made way to age 18 going to California for the first time. Ginger Rogers had been invited to an award ceremony, a party, and she said, "Come." So it sounds so, natural and normal. And now, I think about it, it feels like it happened to someone else completely. Yeah. So we did get to California. I was working every shift possible at a local hotel in Kingston. Howard was working on my granny's gardens and all the gardens. We're 18, trying to get money together to go for the flight, believing that Ginger Rogers and her friends, Joy Hodges, who'd organised this for us,
be waiting at the airport.
And for them both to turn around and say, "Well, we've had, I think 10 husbands between them, and we're not going to put up kids. You're not staying here." Now, there's the sound of the cases dropping to the floor on marbled floor.
What have we done?
Oh my God, where are we going to stay? We can't stay in that motel again. And so they rented this Perry Como's house to stay in, and we stayed for 3 months. And every night Hayden was Hollywood, old Hollywood.
As you say, it is old, but the names, it's just that sort of classic old Hollywood names.
Frank Sinatra barbecue and being around Ginger Rogers.
You mentioned driving Frank Sinatra's car.
Yeah, so we were at Frank Sinatra's and he was quite monosyllabic on that occasion. And my brother said to Mr. Sinatra, we write to people that you might have known when you first arrived in Hollywood, who were during the silent era. names, he said, and I piped up and said, Billy Dove. She was the most beautiful woman in pictures. Oh, my God, Billy Dove. I haven't heard of her name since I was married to Ava Gardner. And I said, well, Mr. Sinatra, she lives a few blocks away from here. She does? And there was a guy standing there like a bodyguard. And Sinatra said, Knuckles.
No, come on.
I made that. Joe, you give the kid a set of car keys, and me, go and get Billy and bring her to the barbecue. And
did she come?
She did. 3 hours late because at 90-something, she's putting on her full-style lashes and trying to find her fox fur. And then years afterwards...
I think I said to you when I saw it, it just sounds like Sunset Boulevard or something, doesn't it? You know, these youthful guys turning up at sort of the silent movie star's house, and she's got to put the makeup on. I mean, it's just... Howard and I with Joe Gillis to many, many Norma Desmonds. Many Norma Desmonds.
Yes. And more Normas than Normans. The women lived a lot longer than
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
And there's a sort of punchline to this story in that if you come right up to modern day, there's talk about this made into a film of itself, of its own.
It will, and it's been through many different avenues. And then I was advised, Austin, you write the screenplay. And I've written books, but I've never written a screenplay before, and had lots of advice from some great people in the industry. And I gave myself a timeline, and I've done it. And it's sitting, and it's lots of conversations around it. And
I bet it's not the easiest thing either, is it? To sort of get these things happening and greenlit with them. The process must be quite...
It is. And I've said many times to a fellow that's really been a mentor to me throughout the whole process, who's at Warner Brothers for a long time. Am I crazy? He said, look, Austin, I've read many scripts and seen many screenplays, and some of those have been made. This has got legs to it. It's all set in the 1980s. It's grey Surrey with... Behind the curtain is bright Hollywood, and it's old Hollywood, but set in the 80s. And I can imagine if Dreamcast would be Tom Hanks to play Jimmy Stewart, probably someone like Melanie Griffith, who's big in the 80s, to play Ginger Rogers.
Who would play you?
And two unknowns.
Right.
Yeah, two unknowns. Someone like Harriet Walker to play my grandmother Violet. I think that would be great.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
We need to make this happen. So, I mean, such a fantastic story, and just remarkable, and the charm of letter writing. But I guess we all had pen pals or letters we wrote in our youth, but I don't remember anything that sort of escalated like that and turned into such a remarkable story.
It is an even today we had some wonderful people in from Chanel who were here very early to go to Ascot, and I gave each of them, one of them, a card and a small gift, and I handwrote the card, and all of them said, "Wow, your handwriting."
Have you got very neat handwriting?
Yeah, I have got very neat handwriting. Yes, yeah. And that's lovely. It's just the handwritten note makes a huge difference.
But both you and Howard must have had, and I can imagine it now having spent a little bit of time with you, but you must have had a confidence and sort of assured nature as 18-year-olds.
Yes, yeah.
Does that surprise you now that you like you say, how did we do that? Like it happened to someone else?
There are dips, Hayden. There are dips where I feel confident, feel less confident.
Yeah.
Howard wasn't confident at all, but now he's head of corporate internal communications for Nespresso.
Yeah.
And he's talking to 140 countries, and he's hosting a whole event. And I look at him and think, gosh, that's amazing.
But what was he like at 18? Were you more confident than him?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Were you kind of leading the charge?
Yeah. Howard was the guy that never wore jeans, always wore a cravat. He hid. He was a gay man and hid that for a long time. So obviously he was always wary that anyone might find a chink in his armour. So I was his great protector growing up. And the place he felt the safest was amongst old movie stars, because they never asked a question, because it was all about them.
Yeah, so, they're not interested.
Not interested. As long as you arrive with those Fortnum's biscuits, you're a friend of mine.
That's the key, the Fortnum's biscuit, and there we go. Well, the name of the podcast is Man in the Mirror, and I love to find out about the guest's idea of self-image, I suppose. So, when you're looking in the mirror in the morning, how do you feel about Austin that looks back at you? Are you someone that's comfortable with your appearance?
I'm happy because I've already planned the night before what I'm wearing the next day, so I can look in the mirror and know what I'm wearing.
Yeah,
I always wear a tie. I love wearing ties.
It's very dapper.
A tie in a pocket square. Please don't. They don't have to match. Never do that. Can't be matchy. I thought about it this morning. I looked in the mirror and I thought, gosh, I'd love to be able just to say hello again to all those people I knew. And what I love doing about things like this podcast, Hayden, is when I'm talking about those old stars, and not so much the Sinatras, but the Billy Doves and the Joy Hodges.
So you want to go back and talk to them?
I feel they're sitting on my shoulder now.
Do you?
And I remember Myrna Loy, who was in the Thin Man series. Myrna Loy said to me once, I'm telling you my stories because I want you to tell my stories when I'm no longer here. And I'm doing that. And it gives me goosebumps to think about it. And I'm doing it for Myrna, for Joy and for Billy and for all those others. And that's what
taking that responsibility of telling their stories.
And that's what ultimately the film will be about.
Yeah.
It's a celebration of age. I think, gosh, everything's out there now, but ageism is still the last taboo.
Yeah,
it is.
But you feel comfortable in, I mean, this doesn't have to be a sort of superficial appearance thing, but are you someone that's sort of happy with what looks back at you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. People say, "Oh, I bet you miss your hair having no hair anymore." No, I don't. And when chaps come into Truefitt Hill and say, "Oh, there's no point in me booking for a haircut, I haven't got any hair," you need to maintain what you have, and maintain it really well. So yeah, I'm happy. I could do with my eyelids are dropping a bit. I could do with something there, but no, I am happy. I'm happy that I've got my wife Joanna. I'm happy with my son Nate. I love having a teenager as a son.
Yeah, Nate's just finished GCSEs as well.
He's a great footballer. He's passionate.
Were you a good sportsman?
Running, long legs, athletics,
those great legs,
high jumps, those hardy legs. Yes. Nate is. If it was drive and passion, he'd be a Premier League footballer. His drive and passion.
Does he play at a good level?
Yeah, he does. I think his football coach said to me, Nate sees something on the pitch that nobody else sees. And that's his...
Not a rugby ball.
USP. No, that's football, yeah. So, and cook, he's embraced cooking as well. So sometimes he'll say, I'll cook tonight. Doesn't wash up, but you'll have everything.
Can't have it all.
No, I think it's a rare thing, really, for many of us to look in the mirror and be happy. And I'm happy. I'm happy.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things, that confidence and being at peace with yourself, I think that tends to sort of emanate out anyway, doesn't it? I think that confidence is a good thing.
My epitaph will read, he cared. And I think it might say they both cared. Someone asked Howard and I once, what was your game plan with all these rich old people? And I just said, I cared. And it didn't matter whether Elizabeth Taylor or one of the Munchkins of the Wizard of Oz, they'd all been something, and they'd all used to be in pictures, and that's the name of the film. I used to be in pictures.
Yeah.
And the book that came out earlier. Yeah, it's just caring, really, and taking a bit more time to listen.
No, that's lovely. And I guess with stars like that, or anybody, you always assume, oh, well, everyone else must be, taking up their time and asking them questions, but sometimes people do want to be listened to, don't they? And it doesn't happen as often as you think, maybe. Yes. And I thought it was such a lovely quality that you have, and I try to do is to people like to be asked things. It's better to ask and listen than just do all the talking, isn't it?
And the other thing that makes one happy is to make space for your creativity or your hobbies or whatever they may be. I wanted to be an illustrator.
Did you?
Yeah. And I used to draw from a very young age. My grandfather, Reginald, taught at St. Martin's, and my other grandfather, Donald, was a chauffeur, but he also was a wonderful handwriter.
I think I've seen on Instagram, you put up some of your
drawings, sketches, yeah. And I use colour pencil and watercolour paper. But no, I wanted to be an illustrator. My father said, an illustrator? You never get a job being an illustrator. So I went to art school and studied graphic design and never really did an awful lot with it. Now, all these years later, I do spend time sketching and I draw portraits from photographs.
Do you go back to some of those old Hollywood movie stars?
Yeah, and there's a Hollywood publicist I know called Rob Harris, and he was saying to me the other day, Austin, you capture the soul in those eyes. And I always start with the eyes and work up from there. And it's odd. I can work on a painting, a drawing, and you really capture someone's soul. It's true. So yeah, I love being creative. That's something that's a luxury.
Yeah. So we often talk at the end of the podcast about the things that make you happy, but that's the thing for you, is it creativity?
Yes. Yeah. My wife, a couple of summers ago, said, you should try Reiki healing. I said, really? And I said, oh, go on.
What, doing it?
No, being a I'm going to say victim. But having someone perform Reiki healing on me.
Yeah.
And I did. I went to a lady called Alison.
How was it?
I was sitting there quite stiff, and she said, I can put my hands on you, or I can hover with the hands. I said, in for penny, in for pound, that's fine. I was lying on the couch, on her table, on the bed, and she was working from my head around my right side. She got to my shoulder, and I couldn't realize whether I was crying or whether I was awake or asleep, but I was aware there was tears rolling down my face. Wow. And when she was standing by my shoulder and with her hands on my bare arm, I thought, gosh, that feels like my grandmother's touch. It was cold, a cold touch.
Goodness.
Anyway, when she finished, we sat down, we chatted for a bit, and I said to her, there was a moment where I felt a coldness, and also the purple lights she put on, that was pretty spectacular. And she said, oh no, that wasn't purple lights, that was Violet. And Violet was my grandmother's name.
Whoa.
Yes. That was a moment. And then around the same time, my office here is with Truefitt Hill on Piccadilly, just off Piccadilly in St. James. I was walking on Piccadilly. This man stopped me and he said, I feel I need to talk to you. I feel I need to stop you. I thought, well, gosh, okay. And he said, there's a flower on your shoulder. I said, okay. And he said that the letter O means something. There's a letter O. There were three points. I can't remember the last one. I think it was the letter N, actually. And I hadn't realised he was actually writing things down. So he wrote down the flower on my shoulder was violet. The letter O for October, that's my birth month. And the letter N, actually, for Nate, my son Nathan. The strangest thing, though, exactly the same week in Switzerland, where my brother lives, he was also stopped by a man in Lausanne who also wrote something down. He had the same flower, a violet, when they said the man said there was a flower on your shoulder. And he also had the month, October.
That is really strange.
It's really, really strange. Yeah.
I'm also a twin. I have a twin sister. And people always ask, do you have that sort of special ESP and that connection? And I always tend to disappoint people because I don't feel like we do. And I could ask you the same sort of cliche. Do you have that
we do.
Close connection still with Howard, even though you're in different places?
We talk all the time.
Do you?
Or even if it's a WhatsApp, every day.
Do you?
Yeah. And it can be something so random that Hayden, I can say to Howard, I've got a song in my head, and Howard will say, it's Wired for Sound by Cliff Richard. Oh my God, it is Wired for Sound by Cliff Richard. I mean, how random is that song?
I like small speakers.
I like tall speakers, exactly.
But most of all, I like loud. I love that. That video, sorry, a complete digression, but that video in the roller skates is iconic.
I think it's Cliff's best song ever.
I do.
Yeah. Wired for Sound.
I do. I had, I think, an 8 or 9 or something, a Cliff Richard cassette for Christmas with whatever album that was on. Loved it. I genuinely think that song stands up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Devil Woman, it's good. Wired for Sound, great.
The other thing about looking in the mirror, it's for me, it's looking back and it's nostalgia. And I think music played a huge part of growing up. My father always had his vinyl. I remember when my mum bought Tina Turner in his private dance and it played all over the house all the time.
Yeah. Me and my mum went to see Tina Turner a couple of times at Wembley. Yeah. She loves her.
Yeah, music special. Peggy Lee's Black Coffee album. I know I've got all my dad's vinyl. And
have you?
I can smell it and it takes me back. Yeah.
Oh, Austin, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
It's such an open, and I can totally see why those movie stars of yesteryear responded to you in the way they did. You have such an openness, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for coming on Man in the Mirror. And I'm going to put details of some of the products you mentioned, and of course, more about the Truefitt Hill collections on the program notes. But for now, Austin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Hayden. Lovely. Thank you.
Huge thanks to Austin for joining me on the pod. Such an engaging guest. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, hearing those stories of old Hollywood and what a young Austin and his twin brother did in their teenage years. Just brilliant. Not only that, of course, our conversation around Truefitt Hill and hearing what the brand is up to these days. You've got the Highgrove range that he was talking about in conjunction with the King's Foundation. And it's a really, really strong line, as is the Mayfair range, which is one of the more recent ones too. So look, they've got quite a lot of different sort of splashes and colognes and soaps and in different sort of collections, but well worth going into the Truefitt Hill store in St James if you can, or checking them out online. On Instagram, Truefitt and Hill are at Truefitt and Hill Official. Now, Truefitt, in case, let me spell it for you. TrueFittandHill Official. So Truefitt and Hill Official is their handle on Instagram, and it's truefittandhill.co.uk online. So truefittandhill.co.uk online, where you can buy the product lines and also book in for the barbershop. And as I mentioned in the podcast, had a really lovely experience with in the barbershop with Aldo, who did a really great haircut. And it's just such a, I don't know, refined, calming atmosphere, and the products they use, it's, just feels like a very special self-care moment, and what a lovely place to get a haircut. So if you're able to get into central London or you want to gift someone a haircut or a grooming service, then Truefitt and Hill in St James is absolutely the place to go. So, not only is there the product range, there's also the barbering services that are well worth checking out. So huge thanks to Austin. And if you want to find out more about Man in the Mirror, I'm on Instagram at Man in the Mirror Pod. I'm also on TikTok at You Smell Great, What Is It? So yeah, on Insta at Man in the Mirror Pod, TikTok at You Smell Great, What Is It? Which is quite a new account. So come and find me on either of those accounts. I also have an Instagram account, You Smell Great, What Is It? Which is a bit more fragrance forward, a bit more fragrance led. So anyway, all those places you can find me, and I'll be updating, what's coming next on Man in the Mirror and future guests. So look, thank you for joining me this week. Thanks to Austin. Thanks to you, as always, for listening. And I'll be back next week with another Man in the Mirror. Until then, take care.